Good morning, Nation. John here. Thank you very much, as always, for being here this morning. Thank you to the moderators, by the way, who do an exceptional job here at Prepper Nation, son. And if it's your first time here at Prepper Nation, welcome. Maybe consider subscribing to the channel. So anyway, this entire week has been about building up a playlist for the main page. It's available now, the main page, kind of horror story shift events. What those look like and how to prep for those. And this morning, it's been a big hit, by the way. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. So occasionally, every few weeks, we may drop one of these videos and just add it to the playlist. But I digress. This morning, we're going to be talking about an invasion, what that would look like here in the United States, and how to prepare for it. So, the term invasion, it's pretty broad. It's a broad term. It encompasses a lot of different things, a lot of different ideas. You could point to the southern border and you could say, son, we having one right now. What are you talking about? And I would totally agree with you on that. You could talk about literal aliens, which is something I didn't think we would have to talk about in 2023. But again, balloons and UFOs and stuff keep popping up all over the place, declassified information. You could be talking about a foreign military, perhaps a certain Asian nation, if you will, putting boots on the ground, full-on invasion, Red Dawn style, or North Korea, anyone. Pick a country, son, and it might be them. But I'm going to tell you this morning, I believe if we see something that resembles an invasion, it's going to be not necessarily an invasion, because that would say, hey, you're showing up unannounced, uninvited. I think they will be invited by our own government, and I think it's going to be the United Nations, the old UN. I think that's the most likely scenario. So I'm going to make a case for it this morning and tell you what I would do. Leave whatever you want to in the comments. Maybe you would prep for it totally different, but this is just my take on it. So here we go. An occupation force. What does that look like? So you can thrive during an occupation, but the first thing you've got to do is you've got to understand what an occupation actually is. Once an occupation takes place, and there have been so many examples throughout history. In fact, you could point to the U.S. government, and you could look at the Middle East, and you can look at all the times that we have been the occupying force. But when you get right down to it, it's colonizing another country. You're going in, you're switching things by way of force, and there's really no choice in the matter. It's colonism when you break it down. So you have to understand first and foremost, if this situation were to pop up, you as an American citizen are being colonized by someone else. Now, again, in this case, I'm pointing to the blue helmets, the UN, but some of you out there may say we're being colonized by literal aliens. What are you talking about? Well, the same rules apply here. So here's how it's going to play out based on, how it's played out throughout history. Okay, standing laws of said country, being the United States in this case, they're totally shelved. This is a suspension of the rules as we know it. This is a suspension of the Constitution, maybe the Bill of Rights. So let's put these on the shelf. Desperate times call for desperate measures, probably some sort of pitch like that. We're just going to put these on the shelf for a little while, and we are going to implement martial law because we said so, and that's why. Now, I would argue, not to get too far off track, but I would argue that kind of thinking is exactly what the founding fathers were trying to warn us about when they set this country up. I think they knew at some point, or they suspected, tyranny was going to get to the point it is. You need to understand, you will not only will you see martial law, but that's going to heavily restrict movement in your own country. And I'm immediately thinking about 15-minute cities. I am. The concept of 15-minute cities, I think that's restriction of movement, but getting people to volunteer for it. But in terms of being colonized, it's forced on you. You're going to stay in your neighborhood, or you're going to stay in your quadrant, whatever they call it, and you're going to have curfews. Curfews will be strictly enforced. They always have been throughout history. Okay. At a certain time, a siren goes off, and then you begin to see soldiers who are armed, and you had better be indoors at that point, or you get taken to the magic place, sometimes never to be seen again. This is going to sting a little bit, okay? But the population will be unarmed. They will forcefully remove weapons at this point. Think about every example of colonization throughout history. Were the civilians that were already there, were they allowed to keep weapons and firearms? No. They were taken away by the government, or the invading government, the invading force. And they were given some lame excuse that always happens. Hey, we will protect you. You don't need this. Right. Getting back again for a second, this is literally why we have the right to bear arms, because I think that our founding fathers knew at some point, hey, maybe your own government, or maybe, an international group is going to step in and say, we'll take care of you. You don't need these anymore. It's never worked out for the good, folks. When they go around and they start collecting guns, it never ends well for the people that are unarmed, at least. Lists, we're always talking in the prepping community, hey, this is going to put you on a list, this is going to put you on a list. Lists begin to come into play during an occupation, because the people that are occupying you, the people that still have weapons, they want to know who the disruptors are. They want to know who the troublemakers are. They want to know, is this person potentially going to cause trouble? If so, we either need to re-educate them, or we need to take them to the magic place again, never to be heard from again. You need to understand that lots and lots and lots of people, your own neighbors, your coworkers, etc., there will be a lot of people that collaborate. There will. We've seen it time and again throughout history. When colonization or an invasion of an exterior force comes in, and things get really, really tough, you can either be a disruptor and be hassled by the occupiers and be taken to the magic place, or you can collaborate. You can get rewarded for being a sellout. You can make a little money, get a little wine, get some extra rations, stuff like this, get some extra privileges. And you need to understand out there, you need to have what I call a come to Jesus meeting with reality. Most people will sell out. This is how most people are wired. Not to harp on the pandemic, but we started to see it during the pandemic. Just their only reward was going to be life will go back to normal as soon as we get these rejects over here to comply. And immediately you begin to see this mob mentality where people are tattling on each other. This person hasn't taken it, the whole 9 yards. You will see it, and it will be large scale, okay? And you will have to be, and this is a tough one for me to swallow, but it has to happen. You will need to become a pod person in public, meaning when you're in public, you're going to have to wear the face and the behaviors of everyone around you. It's the ultimate gray man, so to speak. If we're colonized by the UN, you may not want to, but you're going to have to be pro-UN when you step out of your door. If we're colonized by another country, North Korea, for example, you're pro-North Korea when you step out of the door, and you have to give the illusion to everyone around you, all of these dirtbag collaborators, right? That you're one of them. You are a pod person too. And your freedom and your real existence is going to have to stay behind closed doors. I mean, it just is. And it sounds like a really, really crap situation, right? But there is hope. Getting back to the occupations of the United States in the Middle East, there's hope because those people were able to outlast the occupations. You know, maybe they didn't ruffle too many feathers when they were out in public, but I promise you, in private, they were not friends with the United States because they viewed them as oppressors. All right, I'm going to give you two great examples. The colonies during the redcoat occupation. So when when things were getting really, really heated in the colonies, the king sends redcoats, literal soldiers, to patrol. Curfews were put into place in some areas. Soldiers are walking around. We can't have any anti-British talk going on. Everybody's out in public, pro-Britain, baby, pro-redcoat. But in secret, they're organizing the American Revolution. All right. And that turned out pretty well, I got to admit. But an even better example is the French resistance during World War II. So they were totally colonized. Here's the thing with the French. They kind of get a bad rap for being weak. Their military folds like a house of cards every single time, within a month, within 3 months. Their military is weak. But the civilian population in France, they're very strong historically. And they were able to set up an elaborate resistance that really became almost like one of the major players or major belligerents during World War II. So the French were defeated. The Germans were occupying their country. Things were really bad. The British had a military. They couldn't do much about it. The French resistance was actually doing more damage for a long time to the German occupiers than the British were with a full-blown military. And they did this through organization, which we're going to talk about. The concept is called a fifth column. All right, I'm not talking about the pretend redneck that has a channel here on YouTube and panders to the left and the woke mob and pretends to be oppressed for clicks. Not that fifth column, a real fifth column. All right, the concept of a fifth column is a well organized machine, organized resistance against oppressive tyranny. All right, and I think it originated in Spain a long time ago during the Civil War that they had, but I digress. The concept is freedom beats conscription every single time. So if I'm correct about the UN, you're going to get a mixed bag of soldiers from all different nationalities coming to the United States to peacekeep. Okay, now, again, you can substitute that with the North Koreans on down the line, occupying force. But you have to understand a lot of that occupying force doesn't want to be in the United States. They want to get it over as soon as possible. You know, they want to go in, they want to occupy, they want to change the hearts and the minds of people in 90 days and be gone. All right, this is an Achilles heel of the United States because they still haven't figured this out. When people want to be free and they are willing to organize and drag a conflict out, they can actually make things miserable for an occupying force, and this is exactly what the French did. Propaganda works both ways. And this is very powerful when you are a part of a resistance movement or a real fifth column, okay? So the idea of propaganda, and I'm going to give you an example that's going on today. We see all this stuff about trans and sponsorships and boycotts. That's propaganda. Is it really happening? Yes, but they're blowing this way out of proportion with bullhorns everywhere. Why? Because they want one half of our country to feel oppressed, and they want people like us to be pissed about it. It's division. They're using this as a propaganda tool to divide the population. That's how these people stay in power. Okay, but propaganda works both ways. All right. Going back to Thomas Paine, what he wrote was the truth. All right. He was talking about freedom and people wanting to be free during the American Revolution or just prior to the American Revolution. But he was talking about the spirit of freedom. And he was spinning this sort of like propaganda in a way that he knew was going to affect readers a certain way because he wanted them to feel that. He wanted them to want freedom. And this is something that fifth columns can do, and oppressors hate this. This is why they come through. This is why they literally burn books. They don't want the idea of hope and freedom to begin to spread because that's a huge issue. The idea of having hope and faith and the idea of being free, that is more powerful than tanks on the ground. Long term is what I'm trying to say. So how would you prep for a coming occupation? And again, we may not even see this in our lifetime, okay? We may not ever see an occupation here in the United States, but we're going to war game it nonetheless. And again, I think it would be the UN. I think that's the most likely suspect at this point. So, number one, you want weapons of peace, as I have to call them on the channel now, and plenty of things to interact with the weapons of peace, right? This is also why your government does not want you to have weapons of peace. This is why they discourage you and make you jump through so much red tape to obtain weapons of peace. All right, because the idea of freedom combined with weapons of peace, oh, that's mighty powerful, son. Comms and communication, very important. Excuse me. So I'm not just talking about ham radios. That's great. Ham radios are great. CB radios are great for this, even walkies and things like this. But communication can be very, very simple. All right. A piece of paper and an ink pen with an idea, again, the spirit of freedom written down on that can inspire other people. The most basic forms of communication. How are you going to communicate with people during an occupation? That becomes paramount, because ham radios and things, sorry guys, and walkies, they can be triangulated, especially if your oppressors are highly advanced, highly technical. And we are moving toward an all digital world. We've talked about this. So how do you communicate? And as I've said in the past, you got to go analog. You have to communicate in ways that cannot be tracked digitally. Straight up. I mean, that's what you need to be doing. You need to be vetting people right now, not waiting until an occupation and then scrambling around trying to find people you can trust. That needs to be happening right now. You need to be building real relationships right now with people who think like you and kind of getting a feel for things, if that makes sense, because you need to establish a network right now. It's much, much easier to do prior to an occupation than it is after the fact. Okay? Have a network of people. Have your fifth column already set up. So a fifth column, honestly, when you break the concept of a fifth column down, what you have is an extremely well organized mag. That's literally what it is. But it can be a collection of several mags who work in unison, who have a way to communicate outside of the grid, for example, to accomplish certain things for the sake of freedom. That would be the way to put it. And understand that information is gold. So during a lot of the resistance movements and things in the past, what you would have was, like with the French, for example, getting back to the French resistance movement, some of the French were actually working in the offices, like the main offices of their occupiers, to where they had access to certain pieces of information. Hey, there's going to be a train here at a certain point. Hey, they're moving X amount of troops here. Hey, they're keeping their stashes here. and then they give this to the people that are running the resistance movement, and that information was weaponized for the sake of freedom. So again, this doesn't just apply to the blue helmets. This does not just apply to the United Nations. So supplement that for anything you want to. Little green men in spaceships that come in peace or whatever. Supplement that for Russians parachuting out of the sky to take the country or whatever you want to. The concept is the same, okay? But again, I'm looking at the UN, and here's why. They've become far too powerful. So the UN, the United Nations, actually started as the League of Nations. And if you go back and you really study World War II and you read all of the books from all sides involved and you watch all of the speeches from all sides involved, you got to get those translated because I don't speak all these languages, son. What you will find is a common theme among the axis. They all hated the League of Nations. They hated the concept of one international body ruling everything. They hated that concept, and they spoke out against it quite a bit. We're starting to see it now once again. Putin, especially, he has spoken out against this openly. This is another indicator that world war is here, okay, in my opinion. But when you look at the UN, they are behind a lot of movements in our country right now that is stripping you of freedom. You know, some people, you know, they'll say, "Oh, this is woke. This is woke." These are done intentionally, and the people behind it are at the UN. Kid you not. It's part of the agenda. The agenda didn't write itself. You know what I'm saying? The AI is not quite there yet. The UN functions like a superpower nation. They are literally not a nation. They're not a sovereign nation, and yet they function as though they were a second United States or a second China, this sort of thing, a second Great Britain, maybe. I believe with all my heart and soul that the UN is the latest attempt, and I pray they're not successful, of becoming the one world government that many of you already know about, that believe it's a biblical thing. I believe that there have been several attempts at a one world government, and I think the UN is the latest attempt, and they're getting pretty close, which is scary for me. But the biggest red flag beyond all of that, as I watch our generals talking, you know, they'll give press conferences and things, and I'm looking at all of the medals, I'm looking at the US flag and stuff. There's something inherently wrong with seeing a United States general up here talking, wearing the branding of the United Nations, wearing the branding of an organization that's not even a country. It's just an organization that's ran by really, really rich people. This lets me know that our own military, to a degree, is compromised, at least the upper echelon, the shot callers in our military, heavily compromised at this point. And so it is time for a fifth column, folks. A real fifth column. Folks, this is John with Prepper Nation. We should be back Monday with a live stream. Again, I've been trying to put this playlist together, and occasionally we will drop one of these videos, and I'll just add it to the playlist. But until Monday morning, y'all take care, and God bless.